Warning, the following video contains spoilers to the Final Fantasy XIV A Realm Reborn Main Scenario Questline. If you would prefer to experience the story for yourself, then stop watching now. This is your one and only warning. No, but seriously, abandon ship. This one is kind of a big deal. Patch 2.5 Before the Fall. With the revelation of the Flame Marshal being a Garlean spy, Teledji Adeledji has taken advantage of the situation to cause a stir within Ul'dah. This prompts Alphino to station himself and the Crystal Braves in the city for the foreseeable future in an attempt to maintain the peace. Instead of joining him, however, you are instead tasked with entertaining Lucia, who has arrived at the Rising Stones per request of Sir Aymeric. The astrologians of Ishgard have seen the Dragon Star burn with ridiculous intensity, with the last occurrence of this particular change coinciding with Midgardsormr's destruction of the Agrius 15 years ago. In order to quell the fears of his people, Aymeric hopes to investigate the Keeper of the Lake directly, but also fears that by going through the proper channels in Ishgard he may waste precious time. It is his hope that you will investigate the wreckage in his stead, and so you hop on a boat and head on over. This dungeon has you scaling the wreckage of the Agrius as well as Midgard's lifeless body, until you reach the top where you confront Midgardsormr's spirit itself. After a hard-fought battle, the dragon agrees to speak with you, but unfortunately he denies your plea of peace for Ishgard. Instead, he states that the Ishgardians must be punished for the actions of their forefathers, revealing that a Dravanian attack upon the city is imminent. Midgard makes ready to kill you, but recognizes that you possess Hydaelyn's blessing. So instead, he cuts off your access to said blessing, while also revealing that he himself is in a covenant with Hydaelyn. Midgard then takes the form of a baby dragon, deciding to use this form to accompany and watch you in order to better judge your actions. With confirmation of a potential attack incoming, you report back to Lucia, but with the current state of Ishgard's defenses, she seems mostly unconcerned at the news. At roughly the same time, Moonbreeder comes back ready to share the results of her research, for after some time deep in thought, she believes the answer to your ether problem may come from the land itself. Scattered throughout the land are corrupted crystals, such as those seen in Mordona or northern Thanalan. Using a siphon she has constructed, Moonbreeder hopes to draw ether from these crystals from afar, without having to need them immediately on hand. Unfortunately, when the two of you go to field test the siphon, you receive a visit from Nabriales. To make a bad situation worse, the Ascian realizes that you have been cut off from Hydaelyn's blessing and decides to take advantage of the situation. The two of you chase him back to the Rising Stones, where he seeks to claim Tup Samadhi, a powerful staff once wielded by Louisoix himself, now kept in safekeeping by Minfilia. As it turns out, the staff is capable of drawing a massive amount of ether without the need of crystals, making it the perfect tool for the Ascians to use in their attempts at further rejoinings. Naturally, Minfilia refuses to part ways with the relic, so Nabriales does the only rational thing and kidnaps her into the void along with it. The rift stays open behind him, however, allowing you to give chase and challenge him within the chrysalis. Also, I forgot to mention that he claims responsibility for destroying the Isle of Val. Probably figured I should mention that. You endure a hard-fought battle with the Ascian while Minfilia just kinda hangs out the whole time, after which the two of you escape back to the Rising Stones. Nabriales immediately returns, however, prompting Minfilia to trap him within the aura site. With Tup Samadhi on hand, you channel its energy into the aura site, but unfortunately it's just not enough to overcome the Ascian's will. Realizing this, Monbrita sacrifices herself in order to give you the push you need in order to defeat Nabriales completely. All of the other Scions arrive shortly after, and are heartbroken to learn of her passing. However, knowing that Monbrita's sacrifice proved her theory capable of defeating the Ascians, Minfilia pledges to carry out her work so that her sacrifice will not have been in vain. Under the shadow of the Keeper of the Lake, the Scions give memorial to Monbrita, while Midgardsormr warns you that other, possibly more difficult, trials await you in the near future. When you revisit the makeshift grave with Ul'dah, the two of you notice several dragons flying towards Ishgard, and Minfilia urges you both to return to base. Over at the gates of Ishgard, Ysael and the heretics have dispelled the first set of wards protecting the city, making it easily vulnerable to Dravanian attack. This leads to my husbando once more requesting your aid, and it is at this meeting you are joined by the Azure Dragoon of Ishgard, Estinian. Head of the Dragoons of Ishgard, the Azure Dragoon stands apart in that they were exposed to the energies of one of the eyes of the dragon Nidhogg. In fact, Estinian and his relationship with Nidhogg are the focus of the Dragoon Job questline from levels 30 up until 50. And if you've done the Dragoon questline up until this point, Estinian even greets you as an equal, which is a nice little touch. Once introductions are out of the way, Aymeric confides in you that the Dravanians' interest in Ishgard partially stems from a desire to reclaim the previously mentioned Eye of Nidhogg. Although the eye was taken from him several hundred years ago, dragons don't quite see time the same way everyone else does, with their memories and hatred enduring far beyond a normal mortal lifespan. Should Nidhogg reclaim the eye, its energies will restore a large chunk of his lost power, allowing him to bring untold death and destruction to the city of Ishgard. To this end, Aymeric pleads that you join the front lines to assist Ishgard when the Dravanians inevitably attempt to breach the defenses. Alphano is quick to point out that this arrangement only really benefits Ishgard, but the Knight Commander argues that should Ishgard fall, it'll be one less obstacle standing between the Garlean Empire and the Eorzean Alliance. Before you leave, Estinian also reveals that his power from the Eye allows him to catch glimpses of Nidhogg's thoughts and feelings. Sorta like Harry Potter and Voldemort, Alphano mobilizes the Crystal Braves to assist with the defense, but becomes frustrated when the Grand Companies refuse to offer more than a small force to assist Ishgard. Merlvib reminds Alphano that this is because Ishgard is not currently part of the Eorzean Alliance, and therefore does not take priority over the current primal and Garlean threats the other city-states are currently facing. However, Raubon does what he can, sending more soldiers from the Immortal Flames and allowing the Brass Blades more control over the Sei's defenses in turn. There isn't much time to waste though, because shortly after the Dravanians begin their assault on the gates of Ishgard, prompting you to rush to the Steps of Faith to fend them off. Here's a fun little bit of trivia. This fight was considered overly difficult back in its heyday, to the point that it got very heavily nerfed. This fight entails utilizing various cannons, dragon killers, and other mechanics in order to slow down the Dragon Vishap's advance. Back in its heyday, the DPS check on this fight was actually very tight. But nowadays, he just sort of melts, and I'll be very shocked if you see him get past the halfway point. Upon successfully defending the city, Everyone celebrates while Ascian states his true heart's desire, to kill Nidhogg with his bare hands. As a result of this victory, Sir Aymeric and a group of his temple knights head to Ul'dah for a banquet to commemorate the four nations fighting alongside each other for the very first time in 15 years. While preparations for this are made, you are given a couple of tasks to attend to in the meantime, which I would love to show you cutscenes or footage of them, but they're neither in New Game Plus or in the in-room cutscenes, so have these horrible drawings instead. Tataru tries to take steps to be more useful on the field of battle, but her attempts to become an Arcanist don't go well, and she ultimately resigns herself to her role as the Scions' receptionist and treasurer. You also investigate the disappearance of one of the younger members of the Crystal Braves, ultimately learning that he's been murdered, and that some of your allies suspect foul play. Through all of this, the preparations for the banquet come to a head, and you return to Ul'dah to help put on some finishing touches. This leads to you eventually finding an oddly placed empty vial, which against your better judgment you decide to just pick up and keep on you, because, you know, what could possibly go wrong with that? However, before you can attend the banquet yourself, Nanamo summons you to her own personal chambers to speak in private. The Sultana reveals to you her plan to step down from the throne, thus ending Ul'dah's long history of monarchy. In doing so, she hopes to dispel the hierarchy of Ul'dah's nobles and poor, but also realizes that her actions will temporarily cause chaos within the city. Fearing Reborn may struggle to maintain the peace on his own, she asks that you assist him in maintaining said peace, as your actions across the realm have proven you to be one of the very few people the Sultana can truly trust. With your acceptance of these terms putting the Sultana at ease, Nanamo takes a sip from her goblet. With Nanamo collapsed on the floor, TLDR arrives with the brass blades, proclaiming the Sultana to be dead, and very quickly assumes the wine she drank to be poisoned. Needing no other evidence to prove his case, he has the brass blades arrest you for murdering Nanamo. Meanwhile at the banquet, Aymeric thanks the Grand Company leaders for their aid. He also announces to the room that he plans to speak to the Archbishop of Ishgard and use the defense of the Steps of Faith as an excuse for Ishgard to end its isolation and hopefully one day rejoin the Eorzean Alliance. Alphino looks on bitterly as he hears the empty words of the other Grand Company leaders, but gets pulled away when one of the Crystal Braves requests his presence on something urgent. Shortly after, TLDR arrives with some of the Temple Knights of Ishgard, claiming that the Dravanians are once more attacking the city and that the Knight Commander's presence is urgently requested back home. Aymeric and Lucia have their misgivings, but decide to play along and take their leave for the time being. Once the Ishgardians are out of earshot, TLDR wastes no time in revealing that the Sultana is dead, claiming the act to have been committed by the Warrior of Light and blaming the Scions as a whole for the act. However, his claims begin to become rather outrageous, as he accuses the Scions of being capable of mind control, as well as conspiring with the Ishgardians in invading and conquering the rest of Eorzea, making many present become skeptical of his claims. Reborn, meanwhile, is in shock, unable to believe the Sultana is dead, but this shock quickly turns into rage when TLDR gloats over her death, as he realizes that in truth, TLDR was behind Nanamo's poisoning. The Lalafell immediately goes on the defensive, but can't hide his happiness at the success of his plan, resulting in Reborn drawing his weapons.
but my hope will never die.
Wow. With Teleji dead on the ground, the room devolves into chaos, with Lalorito blaming Ralban for Nanamo's death as all of the guests run out in terror. In his anger, Ralban turns his blades on Lalorito, but Ilberd rushes to the Syndicate member's defense, cutting off Ralban's arm. I guess somebody needs to give him a hand. With the situation rapidly getting further and further out of hand, Merlvib and Connie Senna leave the city, although they do so reluctantly. Ilberd, meanwhile, reveals his true nature, mocking Ralban for his loyalty to the Sultana and claiming responsibility for her murder. Ralban quickly uses his remaining arm to engage Ilberd, but uses the fight as a distraction to cut your bonds in hopes that you can escape the city and clear your name. The Scions, except for Alphino, reunite outside of the room as the Brass Blades and the Crystal Braves give chase, prompting Ul'dah and Papalymo to stay behind to try and cover your escape with the rest of the Scions. The rest of you retreat to an aqueduct below the city, but your potential captors are hot on your trail, prompting Y'shtola and Thancred to stay back as well. Shortly afterwards, however, Minfilia claims that Hydaelyn is speaking with her, prompting her to stay behind and that only you must run onward and escape the city. Now alone, you step out into the sands of Thanalan, only to be greeted by Alphino, who, despite being led into a trap by the Crystal Braves, was also able to escape. Your luck begins to turn around when our old friend, Sexy Grandpa, shows up in his cart. Alphino's sister Alice caught wind that the Scions were in trouble and sent him to keep an eye out for you. Once the cart begins wheeling away, you also learn the identity of Alphino's companion, him named Pippin, Ralban's adopted son. He's been keeping an eye on the Alamegan front all this time, and by pure chance and coincidence just so happened to return to the city while all this was going on. You know what? Okay. Not having the wool pulled over his eyes, and knowing full well of the Monetarist corruption, Pippin took it upon himself to guide Alphino to safety. Once you have traveled some distance from Ul'dah, you are reunited with Cid, who gives you a ride to Camp Dragonhead in Kurthus. Upon arriving, Horshaphant grants you permission to stay at Camp Dragonhead until he can secure you entryway into Ishgard. On top of that, he informs you that some of your other friends have arrived ahead of you, leading you to a room where Tataru is waiting. She was escorted to Kurthus by Yugiri, who happened to lose her mask in a scuffle along the way, thus marking this as the first in-game appearance of the Al-Ra race. After informing you that Urianger is also currently safe, Yugiri tells you that her fellow Domans are currently keeping an eye out for any news concerning the other Scions, and will let you know the moment she hears anything. Unfortunately, Alphino is not handling things very well, blaming himself for all that has come to pass due to his own arrogance. Horshaphant and Tataru both reassure the elf child that while things are grim, everyone can still band together to make the future bright once more. Their words don't fall on deaf ears either, as Alphino breaks out of his wallowing and agrees that if he gives up, the rest of the Scion's sacrifices will become meaningless. Meanwhile, Organization 13 meets to discuss Nabriales' death, as they now realize that they themselves can be killed, and that far greater measures need to be taken in order to carry out their own plans. Also, Urianger is there, and at Elidibus's request. This is probably fine. And now, with nowhere else to go, to the far north, the gates of Ishgard loom before you, offering sanctuary, but also doubt as to what the future might hold, as well as the truth behind the Dragonsong War. And with that, the story of A Realm Reborn comes to a close as we begin our journey heavensward.